And it's nice to see lots of old friends and chiming in. So good to hear and see so much involvement here. So we're really pleased to have David Berenbaum, for the director of the Office of Housing Counseling for HUD. I mean, it's not an exaggeration to say this has been a very successful year this past year. A lot of leadership that David has shown. We've has really moved the role of housing counseling to be much more visible inside HUD and also outside. Has really engaged deeply with our field and with lots of information, lots of dialogue, lots of opportunity. It's been a very exciting time, and he earned the being the recipient of the Champions of Housing Counseling Award this year, well earned, and we're very, very glad to have him here. So David, I'm going to hand it over to you and let you go from here.
Bruce, thank you. And hello, everyone. It is really wonderful to be here with you today. And I hope to really walk you through some of our office's priorities and agenda. Bruce used the word opportunity. And I just really want to share with you that I think we have a lot of opportunity ahead. And Ebony, I think if you could call up the PowerPoint, I'm going to dive right in. So many of you have heard me speak, and I have a theme that I've been using at various programs, and I genuinely in my heart believe it, that the time is now for housing counseling. I know there are so many challenging issues and wonderful things that we are working on right now. And some of the limitations, such as funding, some of the challenges, such as diversifying our funding base, the realities of having to respond to so many emergency situations, such as the good works being done by our agencies in Hawaii or elsewhere right now in response to disasters. Despite all of these challenges, I believe firmly that we are at a moment in time, let's go to the next slide, where in fact we can move the agenda forward. But before I begin, I want to thank all of you for the wonderful work that you're doing to help individuals and families to ensure they have the knowledge, the expertise, and they also know that services are available to them to make a difference and improve their housing situation. This is something that you do in and day out every day. And my entire team at the Office of Housing Counseling, all of our professional staff, many of whom are viewing today as well with me, are in fact excited to be engaging with you with all of our priorities. Let's go on to the next slide. So we have some very ambitious goals. First and number one is to elevate the profession of housing counseling. We're doing that in so many ways right now, engaging with the public sector, the private sector, working internally at HUD, as well as being very visible through our national awareness campaign. And later today, I'll share some of the initial results of our efforts in 15 metropolitan areas across the country. I firmly believe our work is about people and places, that we're making the difference in the lives of the consumers who we counsel, as well as all of the communities that we work in. And as you know, over the years, we've reached about 1 million to 1.3 million consumers each year. And that's to be applauded. It's great work. But there's so much more we can be doing. At the Office of Housing Counseling, we have established a big, hairy, audacious goal, a very, very meaningful goal of within the next 5 years, serving over 3 million households per year. And I believe, again, because the time is now, that we can do this. We can create a whole nation of folks who say, hey, I'm thinking about moving into a new home. I'm not sure who I can speak to. Maybe I should call that housing counselor I saw the awareness campaign for, or having realtors or realtists or housing finance professionals say, speak with a housing counselor and then come talk to us. That is beginning to happen more and more and more. And part of it is the Let's Make Home the Goal campaign. Next slide, please. So the time is now. I really believe that working in partnership we can accomplish this. Next slide. I'd like to begin by highlighting a few things that are coming up in the near future. First and foremost, Bruce and Ellie shared with me that you have a lot of questions about the new HUD handbook. First, I want to compliment my talented team who has been working on this. We've been in the clearance process with all the offices at HUD. We're very happy that after a decade, a clean, refreshed, a really powerful new handbook has been issued. There are going to be some minor edits and changes. Thank you to those of you who pointed out some dead links or some issues that need further clarification. But again, the document that everyone's looking at is about 98% done before it goes effective on January 1st of next year. On October 19th, we are going to be doing our very first webinar. It's really going to be a very informative briefing for everyone here today, and I hope all of your housing counselors can join, because there are a lot of changes in the update. You know, they've been summarized in the written forms that are published online for you to find out about. But during this program, we've been receiving a lot of questions, and we invite you to keep those questions coming in, because we are going to be responding to the most common questions that are coming up. And I'm happy to try to address some of those today as well. But I want you to keep those questions coming in, because not only will we respond to them, but we also hope to issue FAQs to be very, very responsive so that everyone is on the same page as we move forward. So again, October 19th at 2 p.m. Eastern time, this will be recorded so it can be viewed on demand on the HUD Exchange. Next slide, please. So Bruce noted, we've been very busy at the Office of Housing Counseling. First, I want to share a few updates about the next NOFO, which I know many of you have questions about. The Comprehensive Housing Counseling Grant, as well as the HBCU MSI Partnership Grant, which is a component of the Comprehensive, and the Training Grant are all in final clearance. It is our hope to issue those in the extremely near future. They're coming up. As well, certainly we want to be sure to issue it well before November, mid-November, about the 17th. And I think many of you understand where we are with the federal budget. My hope is that we will have a budget adopted. There'll be no need to furlough staff, but we're working diligently to work through all the challenges. And in fact, from our perspective, the NOFOs are ready to go. It's just a matter of issuing them in the Federal Register. And I want to wish everyone good luck. We've been doing a lot of work to streamline the grants, as well as to move to annual funding, following the calendar, the federal fiscal year. The threatened shutdown slowed some offices down in review, but we are now in the free and clear to move forward with that. So look for that in the very near future. As well, we have the Homeownership Initiative. And again, that was published for your review to really begin to think about what is, for the first time, a new approach by our office using a negotiated fixed price for services. The goal being to simplify reporting, as well as to capture more reporting to celebrate the outcome of our work. And we've been receiving a lot of great questions, both online, as well as at various programs we've been speaking about the new Homeownership Initiative, NOFO. We are going to be responding to all of the questions in the form of an FAQ. As well, we'll be offering a webinar when the grant is issued. And again, we're in final clearance with that grant. It will be issued as a standalone grant. And we're very excited about this grant because it's right in line with HUD's priorities of bridging the homeownership gap, as well as promoting housing equity. With regard to other initiatives, first I want to congratulate all of you who are working on our HBCU MSI Partnership Initiative. We are beginning to get reports and the real work product being celebrated from our 16 agencies who are currently in the grant program and over 50 HBCUs and minority serving institutions. We are very focused on expanding this program, the reach of the program to bring more colleges in, as well as to really share best practices among our agencies in the space. For those of you who attended our community conference, our virtual community conference that was held a month ago, I think you know that in fact the whole session on that was very, very powerful and really some really great recommendations being shared by our partners in the field, all of our colleagues in the field who are working on these initiatives. So again, that would be an ongoing priority of our office. More notably, I really want to celebrate the great work that's happening here. I mean, we're hearing and seeing and meeting those who've become homeowners. We're hearing these stories and meeting the new homeowners. We're seeing the results of the programs that are beginning to train counselors to become members of, as HUD certified staff, members of housing counseling organizations. These are also best practices. We're looking at ways that we can support your efforts to bring on the next generation of housing counselors as they are in college or as they are completing courses like this, so that they will have an opportunity to become certified on your staff. The handbook we'll talk more about during Q&A. The National Awareness Campaign, stay tuned, I'll get to that in a moment, but we're really looking forward to analyzing the results, looking at new sites across the country, and we are in active conversations with public and private sector associations, with other agencies, as well with various members of the counseling community to really leverage this campaign. We're looking at a new rent-to-own initiative. This is something that we've been looking at for over a year. It's very exciting. Who is one of the largest landlords in the United States or subsidized housing providers through Section 8, rental assistance, and other programs? By default, it is the federal government. And HUD plays a very significant and powerful role in ensuring safe and affordable housing for American consumers. But we know from studies that a very large percentage of those tenants may be mortgage ready and simply not aware of it. So we're exploring doing a very exciting new demonstration where we're going to try to bridge the relationship between our audience who are tenants as well as our housing counseling organizations. And we're talking about doing an outreach letter, possibly in the same cities where the awareness campaign is taking place, to in fact bring those consumers into those who are being counseled by you in the housing counseling community. The idea, for example, would be to send a letter in various languages, English and Spanish, as well as other languages online, to, in fact, the tenants in various forms of housing, whether it be through HUD, whether it be through the private sector, maybe it's someone who's ready for the Housing Choice Voucher Program, and to connect them with you as housing counseling agencies to move from rental to home ownership situations. Again, it just makes sense. In the private sector, when you have a relationship with someone, you try to build on that relationship. HUD has a trusted relationship with consumers nationwide, and we're thinking about 250,000 consumers in this initial demonstration run that we're thinking about going live early next year. It's being discussed in-house right now. The tribal rulemaking rule is very, very close to publication. I want to thank all of you who submitted comments both through the formal rulemaking process as well as through our final consultation with tribal leaders and entities. In fact, we're working internally at HUD with council to look at all the comments, to respond to them, and then you can expect to see later this year a final rule being issued by our office. We're very excited about the rule because it really embraces the recommendation that came from practitioners in tribal communities, and we firmly believe we will be able to, in fact, have a large number of new providers and counselors in tribal communities once the rule is in place. Housing counseling today, you see the graphic that's on this slide. If you haven't taken a look at the new housing counseling library, it's very user-friendly on any subject. Try it out. I think you'll find it to be very helpful on a host of issues. And I'll talk more about the ongoing impact of house parties. Thank you again to all of you who have participated in house parties. There's been one at each regional office as well as a nationwide one on the mall. House parties are going to continue. And if you note, they are all using the Make Home the Goal campaign theme. And it's a way of elevating, again, public knowledge about the role of housing counseling organizations. We're also beginning a New Americans initiative. This is very important because in many areas of the country, there are a large number of recent immigrants or folks who have resided here for a short period of time who have very specific housing needs. And we're going to be working collaboratively at a national level with other agencies, as well as with the CFPB. And we hope all of you to really mount an outreach program so that these renters, these homeowners and others know that in fact you are available to assist as appropriate. And at our next regional conference, which I'll touch on in a moment, we're going to begin to roll out some very significant programming as part of our regional events in this space. And then, of course, our ongoing efforts in appraisal discrimination and ensuring responsible valuation. Our office has been taking a lead role at HUD with regard to education, with regard to training, as well as engagement with NARAB and other providers across the country. I want to thank all of you who have attended our joint programs with FHEO. If you have not seen them, they're on demand on the HUD Exchange. We are going to be doing more educational activities. And as many of you know, the issue of fair and responsible appraisal will become part of the HUD certification exam moving forward under the Fair Housing module and section. Next slide, please. So I know many of you have been waiting on us to issue a proposed rule when it comes to modernizing, in fact, the delivery of services in housing counseling. I'm happy to share with you that publication of a proposed rule is imminent. You will be seeing it in the very near future as well. It's a question of scheduling in the Federal Register at this point. We are very excited because this rule really has taken all of the counsel that you as housing counseling groups have provided to us through NHRC, as well as from the Coalition of Intermediaries. Our Housing Counseling Federal Advisory Committee has spent a lot of time on the issue. And what you should see in the rule, and I hope what you will respond to favorably, is broadening what has been the traditional approach to housing counseling, which in essence was place-based. Now we're going to leave it up to you to decide on an agency level what you would like to do and how you would like to do it. You can, under the proposed rule, you will see that it accepts, as long as they're to HUD standards, in-person, telephonic, and virtual, as well as the use of other techniques, a combination, for example, of using educational online materials with hybrid or telephonic and so on. It will allow you to develop a program that meets the needs of your constituency and your community. But it will also allow consumers to make a choice. Would they like telephonic? Would they like in-place-based? Would they like virtual? Are they okay with some combination of all of those? So freedom of choice, while ensuring the quality of our program, will be the priorities of this proposal. So again, that is imminent, and we look forward to receiving your comments once this is published. Next slide, please. So I know many of you have attended our first two regional meetings. This is a photo from the San Francisco Bay community. We were in Chicago as well. We have a number of upcoming meetings. You can see them all listed here. We're very excited to be coming to your neighborhood to meet with you in person. We love our virtual community conference. We had 1,500 folks there. But now we're really looking forward to more in-depth conversations. And we have a program in Atlanta, November 8th and 9th. And the 8th is the full-day program. The 9th will be focused on new agencies interested in joining the counseling community. But we're also going to be in Houston, New York, Columbus, Ohio, Boston, Seattle, Denver, and we've just added Miami. Now, Atlanta, we already have 130 people signed up, and we're trying to figure out a way to increase the number. We may add on the possibility of virtual programming. So if you were trying to register today and you could not, just stay tuned. We'll be sharing some news. We're trying to create some additional space. We're looking at the room configuration, as well as adding virtual for folks from the region who would like to attend. But these have been going really well, and our number one goal is to respond to your questions and priorities while we're with you. And we'll have a team of our talented professional staff there in the room who really can spend time on any issue or any idea that you'd like to explore. So again, look forward to seeing you at these regional meetings. Next slide, please. So yesterday I was on Reddit. For those of you who are familiar with Reddit, it's sort of an online written question and answer. And the focus was on homeownership. Some really, really great program questions were coming in. Tell us about housing counseling. Can you tell me when's a good time to buy? How about down payment assistance and so on? Really great questions. I really commend Reddit to any of you for, there's a whole forum on new home ownership. So any agency can take advantage of it. Our number one goal is to drive consumers to you through our awareness campaign. Part of that is we're trying something new in Washington, D.C. that's coming up. For the first time, we're going to be doing a federal employees homeownership expo at HUD headquarters. And we're going to be inviting counseling groups to join us. There'll be programs on different mortgage programs and other aspects of becoming homeownership ready. Every federal employee at various agencies in Metro DC will be invited to attend. And we're going to analyze this program and may replicate it across the country for different audiences. At the same time, the Weaver Building in Washington, D.C. is 55 years old that week. And in fact, we're also part of a celebration that's being orchestrated by leadership with HBCUs in the area. And we'll also be sharing all of these resources with, in fact, students and faculty and others attending that program at HUD headquarters as well. So again, we're trying to be creative and really celebrate what we all do together through partnership in wonderful new ways. The Federal Advisory Committee, as you know, has been meeting quarterly. They have been very, very busy. We had a wonderful meeting just last month. It was a very dense meeting. We covered a lot of ground on individuals who are unsheltered or the homeless. Some very powerful recommendations on how we can expand the capacity of organizations to deliver services in that space, how housing counseling groups can work with organizations in the continuum of care space, as well as how we can engage with local officials more effectively as well. And we're going to be continuing these discussions and offering more training to build capacity in this space. I'll share with you as well that our office has been in deep conversation with the Office of Community Planning and Development. Many of you know they are responsible, for example, all the funds that go to entitlement communities on a state or local level. And these have been very positive conversations with regard to the role of housing counseling and how entitlement communities, in fact, use those funds. I don't want to get ahead of where that office is, but keep an eye in the near future for, in fact, news on opportunities on how you can, in fact, engage more with, in fact, your entitlement communities. We're very excited that more and more entitlement communities are really considering the use of block grant or other funds to support various forms of HUD-approved housing counseling initiatives. So stay tuned for more on that front as well. Now, the regional house parties are likely to continue into the coming year. The HUD secretary is very pleased. I mean, all of the events have been extremely well attended. They're getting quite a bit of local press. There appears to be a jump in inquiries about FHA programs and special purpose mortgage programs and other products being discussed at these programs. So we look forward to working with you and the Office of Field Policy and Management, who is going to be orchestrating many of the events into the coming year. And many of you know we have been with our partners who are funded by us in the training space, doing great work, as well as on our own initiative. We have been doing a host of trainings. There has been a lot of requests for continuing the 101 basic trainings. Look for more to be announced in the very future, because we understand that there are new coordinators, there are new directors, there are new members of the counseling staff joining. And so it's very important for us to keep those refreshed. If you missed the initial 101s, they are also on the HUD Exchange. Next slide, please. So at our community conference, we shared with everyone who registered a new Zoom background. There are 3 of them, actually. I invite you to go to visit the HUD Exchange if you have not taken advantage of this yet. There's an urban, a rural, and a suburban Zoom background celebrating HUD certified housing counselors and our hashtag HUD certified proud. It was a little thing, but little things go a long way. And we do appreciate the work that everyone does every day. And we know many of you do not have the benefit of a background that has been especially designed for you. By the way, you can feel free to add your agency logos onto this, no worries. And we invite you to take advantage of it. Next slide, please. I do want to point out that little logo that was in the corner there. That logo for HUD approved housing counseling organizations, we urge you to use on the internet, with your websites, on your business cards, in your offices. It is now permanent branding to celebrate your role as HUD approved organizations and certified housing counselors. So I just received this earlier this week. This is the initial results from what I'll call the launch of Let's Make Home the Goal. Let's go to the next slide. Now, Let's Make Home the Goal was very focused. We did a lot of market research. You know, we did a lot of focus groups. We also looked at some of the major studies on where opportunities were to, in fact, engage with individuals who are mortgage ready, households that were mortgage ready and unaware of it. We had a very limited budget, but we were working with a very professional marketing and awareness campaign. And we launched during National Homeownership Month in June. And we received a lot of press nationwide because Secretary Fudge announced the initiative while we were on the mall for, in fact, the wonderful event with the builders and others celebrating homeownership that HUD co-sponsors. You've seen much of the collateral. It's there in many languages. It's there particularly for social media use. And there's a lot of great materials for debunking mythology. A lot of people simply don't know that they're homeownership ready. So we have materials on that front. Next slide, please. So again, part of what we wanted to do here was elevate the profession, as I opened the program with, to make the entire community aware of the availability of HUD housing counselors, of HUD approved organizations, and to use you as a resource moving forward. And I think we have really succeeded because, again, the interest in this campaign continues unabated. People are asking, what are we doing next? And we're thinking about that. And we want your input into it as well. But priorities also include to advance housing equity and bridge the home ownership gap. And as we look at our results, we're doing a deeper dive into how do we continue to develop the theme. The photo there is actually, we've been attending events across the country that have cultural significance for all of HUD's audiences. And it's been a joy for our team to be at these events. And our table, simple as it is, has been extremely busy wherever we go. Literally hundreds of consumers calling up and asking about counseling, asking about mortgage products, talking about their credit and so on. So we're happy to refer them to our HUD agencies. Next slide, please. So this has been one of the most well-received social media ads. I trust you've seen HUD placing it, the Office of Housing Counseling. For the first time, the Office of Housing Counseling has handles on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and elsewhere. Big steps forward for HUD, and we're very excited about it. But these types of graphics resonate regardless of language and regardless of where they're being placed. We found that simple messaging is best. And again, we're using sports themes, as many of you know, in Make Home the Goal. Next slide. So these were the initial metropolitan areas. Again, they were chosen based on the dollars we had to spend, the opportunity that were in many studies for home ownership. This is available, you can look at a lot of this information online and our materials, as well as this PowerPoint will be shared with you after the fact. So you can spend more time looking at the cities. Let's go on to the next slide. Now, here are some of the initial results that I'm excited to be sharing with you. First, let me simply put it that Secretary Marcia Fudge is a rock star. We could not ask for a better spokesperson for housing counseling. Her public service announcement, which was done on a very modest budget, kicked off the entire campaign. And it has been viewed by now over 800,000 consumers in entirety. And then it's had over 3.7 million impressions. So more people have viewed it, not watched the whole thing, but it's had quite an impact. And for the spend that we did, it continues to get large number of views every single day. It's a great tool for you to use as well and link to on your agency websites. We're already thinking about perhaps having the secretary do an updated version for the next campaign. We have referred, in fact, 37,000 consumers to housing counseling agencies through our new search engines that were announced last year. We're very interested in hearing and seeing your 9902 reports on how that's affecting, requests for counseling, particularly in the home ownership and how home ownership education space with each of your agencies. We're happy, feel free to drop us a note, drop me a note about what you're seeing, what you're hearing, or who you've counseled. We love that kind of feedback. And then the campaign as a whole has reached 5 million consumers. Now, again, for the purchased ads, because that's what I'm focused on today, not the ads that have been in kind, not the ones that you are placing, not ones that our partners plan on placing for us. This has been extremely successful, or so we're told from the advertising firm. Now, the breakout in the pie chart you can see there, it's a mix of radio, social media, public service announcements, as well as display ads. And where they were placed in very diverse markets, they were used using terms like home ownership and so on social media. So we're analyzing the more in-depth results now as we begin to think about next year's campaign and, in fact, broadening the geographic target areas of the campaign. Next slide, please. So I mentioned already the metropolitan areas and the fact that we've been doing community events. Some of the saturation charts are there. Next slide, please. All right, so before I talk about this, I just want to share one more thing about the campaign, and that is, this is just the beginning. This is a multiple year effort. For the next 3 to 4 years, we are going to continue to leverage this awareness campaign, develop new collateral for your use, and it is our hope to partner with a host of organizations, both from industry as well as other agencies, even state HFAs and others, to drive consumers and to increase public awareness of housing counselors as a trusted resource. So we look forward to continuing to hear your use and see your use of the campaign. I love it when I'm on Facebook or else when I see the social media ads being used by you. Thank you for doing that, and please let us know how we can improve upon this, at least your perceptions on what we can be doing so we can relay them to our marketing firm. So this is one of the reasons I'm really happy to be in a conversation with you today, and we're going to be opening up the discussion shortly. I made a commitment 3 years ago, almost 3 years ago, when I joined the Office of Housing Counseling, to modernize the Office of Housing Counseling. And I think you've seen the many steps that we've taken to date to do exactly that. I'm very pleased that we have a new rule on delivery coming out very shortly, a proposed rule, but there's more that can be done as well. One of the things that I noted during the pandemic, as well as in other situations, is that almost all of you were providing services to consumers that in many cases did not meet what has been perceived as the traditional definition of housing counseling services. For example, doing a budget or follow-up or other related issues. Now, there were issues, for example, where certain programs were requiring a credit check. That is not technically one of our requirements right now. But I just want to share with you that, for example, when consumers were applying for the Emergency Rental Assistance Program or the Emergency Homeowners Assistance Program, I understood what many of you were sharing with me. The consumers were primarily interested in getting help to stay in their housing. By analogy, I can also point to disaster relief situations where many of you have been doing great work, and we are doing a lot more as an agency now. And that was, for example, when someone is displaced from their home after a fire, after a tornado, after a hurricane, and so on. They are interested in their emergency assistance vouchers and finding rehousing as quickly as possible, not necessarily the entire traditional approach to housing counseling. So what we are doing and what we are beginning to do now is to take a fresh look at how we have been defining, in quotes, housing counseling. I throw some example of situations here on the screen, which I've mentioned, including some of the new realities of technology, but we're inviting you as our partners to suggest to us how we can take a fresh look at what we define as housing counseling, how we can capture outcome information and impact information on that front, how we can ensure that our program and your work continues to be perceived as best in class, but last as well, capture all the good work that you're doing and fund it. And we are starting to receive countless suggestions on so many different aspects of the program that we would like to consider as we move forward into 2024. Next slide, please. So I hope we'll open the conversation with your thoughts. And please, there's no wrong answer. Your thoughts on what we can do to expand the role of housing counseling, how we capture the work you're doing, and as well, how we can support it. And then also, I just want to share with you a quick update on industry standards before we open up for that and all the Q&A. You know, at our National Community Conference, I believe many of you know, that we announced with NeighborWorks America that we will be facilitating, the Office of Housing Counseling will be facilitating a discussion with all of you and all of our partners in the housing counseling space, a discussion to update industry, the national industry best practices for homeownership education and the various aspects of housing counseling. We believe the time is now, or the time is right now to do this because of all of our efforts in so many different spaces. It could be, for example, bridging the homeownership gap. It could be with regard to all the new mortgage programs that are available. It could be with regard to some of our efforts in disaster relief. But the reality is the standards, though they've been wonderfully helpful, are terribly out of date, over a decade old. And so we are working with a major contractor, and we are going to be inviting you all into a process to take a fresh look at the NCHEC industry standards and make recommendations to bring them up to date. For example, valuation and ensuring fair evaluation is not there anywhere. And you know what? Who else or what else is not included in the current industry best practices? The Office of Housing Counseling certification, and I could go on to list any number of other issues. So let's go on to the next slide. So again, we're partnering with NeighborWorks to do this, and just know our authority, so to speak, to do this comes straight from, in fact, our handbook and also from Congress, that we can foster conversations on industry best practices, and we want you to take ownership of these. We are here as a facilitator, but we really are looking forward. And at our community conference, oh my goodness, when we opened up the session to the 500 folks who are on this particular session, the ideas were pouring in. We have all of them, and we'll be using them as a starting point for some of our outreach activities, which you will begin to see beginning to happen in the coming weeks. Next slide, please. So the case for modernizing this standard also goes well beyond some of the changes in our program, but also because some of the work we're doing together, work at HBCUs and MSIs, work also with regard to findings in research, such as the Policy Development and Research Homeownership Study over the past decade. We also hope to take our learnings from work that you are doing across the country, on down payment assistance, or on foreclosure prevention, or on issues of ensuring access to housing for persons with disabilities, and really broaden, in fact, and update again, the best practices as a whole. So this is a great time to be doing it. And what you know, if we're being smart about it, we're going to engage, the real estate community, the housing finance community, the servicing and securities community, the appraisal community. Because again, if we're going to leverage housing counseling so that everyone supports our program and engages with us, what better way than to bring them into our very processes? Next slide, please. So I've already mentioned our role will be that of a facilitator, and our entire team is looking forward to that. We're using funds on what's something called the Community Compass Grant Program, and we're really looking forward to this process moving forward. It will take place over an 18-month to 2-year period. We want to do it right, and we want to build consensus. Next slide, please. Great. So that's everything I was hoping to cover today. Again, the time is now. I'm thinking about the next 3 years. Our office operates under a strategic plan that complements HUD's strategic plan. And so much of that is realizing the priorities that you have helped us identify. I just want to thank everyone again for your feedback. And Ellie, let me turn it back to you so we can open it all up.
Great. So we're going to offer folks an opportunity to speak live. And David, I'll give you the opportunity to explain what it is that you're hoping for. But if you have questions, make sure you put them in the Q&A box. After we do this kind of roundtable discussion, we'll go to the Q&A. So go ahead, and David, and explain what you're hoping to get from folks.
Sure. So I'll try to be succinct, unlike my usual verbose self. Let me put it in the form of a question. What service that currently you feel is not funded by the Office of Housing Counseling should be? What work are you doing today that you feel we are not capturing in our current approach to housing counseling? And you know the requirements of the program, but what would you like us to support in your activities for your consumers?
And what I'll let everybody know, if you want to speak to this, you can raise your hand and I will unmute you. But if you do have an idea and you're not comfortable speaking in public, you can pop it into the chat and I will read it out for David on your behalf. So again, if you do have anything that you want to say out loud, raise your hand. Okay, I'm gonna go. All right, Ken Bigos, I'm opening up your mic.
Yes, David and Ellie, good to talk to you. And thank you for your presentation, David. As far as what I would like to see the Office of HUD Housing Counseling look at considering is the incorporation of estate planning education, particularly for the existence of existing homeowners. Our work here in Philadelphia particularly entails the fact that we have a lot of issue of tangled titles, basically where homeowners pass away without preparing a will. And as a result, most of those homes have don't have the opportunity to be transferred to their heirs, which basically has an impact of why I would say Black homeownership rates stay neutral and stay at this low end for such a long time. And I would like to see the Office of Housing Counseling incorporate that type of service in their programs.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a really valuable suggestion, and the recommendation I think is an important one. Of course, traditionally, this has been a topic with regard to reverse mortgage counseling, but I think you're spot on with the recommendation that we need to cover this ground much earlier and much more widely with all of our consumers that we serve. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
All right, Lou Savolka, I am going to unmute you. You should be able to speak now.
Me okay, Ellie?
Can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ellie. And welcome, David. Wonderful presentation. Lou Savolka with DHIC out of Raleigh, North Carolina. Question surrounds marketing of housing counseling and what you and your group can do going forward, specifically to address lenders and realtors. Many times, and I'm sure you have heard this, David, clients will come to us and wish they had known about counseling way in advance of the process. Unfortunately, sometimes we get them toward the end of the process, which of course then it's too late. they've already tied into a lender or they tied into a program that may not be the best or best fitted for them. So the engagement with us is great, but really, David, the issue is how can we market to lenders and realtors and others, affinity groups like attorneys and appraisers and home inspectors to make sure they also speak the same language as us to promote housing counseling.
Lou, we're all in full agreement, I think, on your point about that. So what I will say first is that we are in discussion with major industry trade associations. I mentioned NARAB earlier, and we're going to be doing a lot with them, particularly at many of their home ownership events they're planning nationwide. We're in conversation also with the Realtors, with the MBA and others, exactly on the point that you've raised. And then as well, we are celebrating housing finance programs, FHA included, right? Because 80% of FHA consumers, borrowers, are first-time home buyers. But other programs, such as special purpose credit programs, down payment assistance, and other programs that in fact incentivize or require homeownership education and housing counseling. These are very significant next steps. And HUD plans to do more outreach and education with this in mind. As well, we urge all of you to approach your local chapters. We're doing it. We're trying to speak at events sponsored by the trades, but we also want you to approach them to say, hey, we have this new awareness campaign. Would you like to co-brand it with us? We are planning events, wherever it may be. You know what I'm saying. It's going to take all of us working together to change the culture and awareness with regard to the use of housing counselors. However, what I will say is that more and more industry partners are in discussion with us. We're even in conversation with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and others with regard to trying to have them in some of their initiatives with regard to affordable and community lending also use and take advantage of our collateral and materials. So definitely look forward to working with you and NHRC on that front.
Thank you.
All right, Stacy, you should be able to speak. Stacy Crumbles.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hello, David. Nice to meet you.
Hi,
I am
Stacy.
actually a housing counselor here out in New York on Long Island.
Maybe for anything else?
And my overall kind of maybe not so much a question, but maybe just a narrative as far as what we are here on Long Island dealing with, which is, of course, as everybody is dealing with across the country, higher interest rates. In addition, low inventories, and also living in an area where the impact of the price of the home is really, really challenging for anybody here trying to buy a home. And we're actually seeing more communication opening up with realtors, with appraisers, with inspectors, because all of them want to be a part of that solution, but also a part of the education process. And I was just wondering what your thoughts were. I know it's an individual territory, it's not national, but I know right now from counseling, probably for the last 7 or 8 months, the challenges are enormous for people living on Long Island here. 2-income families, maybe not having full 20% down payment, if you can understand what I'm getting at.
Totally. Stacy, out of curiosity, which agency are you affiliated with?
I am with Long Island Housing Partnership in Hop Hog.
Well, I'm going to date myself, but I used to be with Long Island Housing Services many years ago, and I worked with Jim Morgo, who I know retired a while ago, but I very much am familiar with the community. So I mentioned earlier I was on Reddit yesterday, and this question that you're asking is the question of the day, right? Because people are wondering, is it the right time? Housing costs are high, interest rates are high. When should I purchase? And then, of course, with each and every interest increase, housing becomes less accessible, particularly to low to moderate income consumers that we serve. I will note, the steps that FHA has taken to lower MIP rates or led on student lending issues to try to underwrite more products to the populations we serve. But the question you're asking, was raised on Reddit yesterday from folks in the Bay Area of California, from Denver, from Boston, Massachusetts. And so there are many Long Islands across the country, if I could call it that. But despite that challenge, when we met with focus groups, because when we began the campaign, interest rates were high, were going up, overwhelmingly, the communities that we serve are still interested and committed to realizing home ownership. And of course, now they have to be smart shoppers. They have to take advantage of various down payment programs or special purpose credit programs and the like. And we have to be on our game as well as counseling professionals to be sure we are aware of all the products that are available. There's a reason that you'll see me, for example, in the coming months, doing more media engagement with regard to down payment assistance programs, because so many consumers are not aware of the over 2,000 programs across the country. And I was just in money.com this week, urging consumers to speak with housing counselors. So that's going to be how we approach this. We have to acknowledge the challenges, but we know that the communities that we serve and the consumers we serve still want, as soon as they can, and they're ready to take advantage of homeownership. I know that doesn't solve the issue. I mean, HUD is working on affordable housing issues and other programs, but I mean, candidly, we're still doing our best in the economy we're in right now.
Well, I will tell you, Stacy did type thank you, because I did mute her. So sorry.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So I am going to now allow Buzz Zeman to talk. So Buzz, you should be able to unmute yourself and speak.
Hello. So in St. I know we're better off in St. Louis than we are in many areas of the country. I'm helping a ton, more every month, homeless seniors who have incomes under $1,000 a month. Subsidized housing is woefully inadequate. We got people on the street and I can't get them into subsidized housing. I've got a grant to help people pay first month's rent and deposit. I may not spend it all because there are not enough openings out there. I know this is a little afield from some of the focus here, but I don't know what can be done. I'm anxious to hear where I can advocate for more funding for subsidized housing. It's woefully inadequate everywhere. And I got to say, I know in St. Louis, it's even a little better than some areas of the country.
Yeah, Buzz, first, thank you for making that point. You know, it was one of the reasons we did focus on the unsheltered at our last advisory committee meeting. On a personal note, not in any way related to my role at HUD, I am authoring a foreword for a book on homelessness that is featuring interviews with individuals who are unhoused or under threat of eviction or have experienced homelessness and now have a fresh start. It's going to be a very powerful book with stories as well as essays and photography, all being donated by everyone involved with the effort. But in writing the foreword, which I just wrote my first draft over the past few weeks, in the United States, unfortunately, one of the fastest growing groups of those who are at risk of homelessness or are homeless are the elderly, seniors. As you noted, folks who don't have sufficient income to sustain their housing. In some cases, they have been displaced, like in Florida, due to natural disasters, and perhaps they did not have adequate homeowners insurance, which unfortunately is a theme in the community right now. And, you know, Buzz, in my role as HUD executive staff, what's called Senior Executive Service, I'm not permitted to talk about budgets or other issues. But I think that NHRC has had a very strong voice as an advocacy organization. And I think everyone is aware of the discussions on the Hill with regard to budgets and appropriation. I commend all of you for your efforts on that front. And certainly there is a need for more resources.
So there are a lot of comments in the chat coming through right along these same lines that, you know, seniors are experiencing homelessness for a number of reasons. One person said in St. Pete, it's because of insurance, homeowners insurance, making the home unaffordable. Another thing that I'll just throw out there, I know in New York State, and I think that it is probably happening in other places, but I know specifically about New York State because I'm here, based here. there is a definite lack of HECM certified housing counselors. And and I have heard from other housing counselors around the country that something needs to happen to make it so that more counselors can get through that exam, and are encouraged to become HECM certified. So just giving you that.
Yeah, Ellie, I do want to respond to that. Thank you for that. And we acknowledge there is an increase in need for the number of counselors in the reverse mortgage space. I'll also add, we're taking it a step further. I've asked my staff not only to look at the HECM product, but the growing reality that in the future we'll see more private label product out there as well from the reverse mortgage industry. And we need to prepare for that to ensure that consumers are adequately counseled in the space. The HECM exam, for all of those who have passed it, congratulations. I think that's the highest certification that you can have in the area of housing counseling. And we do agree there's a need for more place-based counselors in a number of areas. I know many of you recently saw the map that NHRC published about where counselors are situated. It was a very powerful graphic. You know, there's a sub-map out there in the HECM space. Now, I will say though, and I really firmly applaud what I'll call face-to-face counseling, particularly for elders. The tension here is that many elders are opting for telephonic counseling, and there are many national providers who are providing that right now. So part of the issue is also choice, if we look at the volume of counseling. But that said, I fully agree with the statement that we need to increase the number of counselors and to be sure they're available in every community. And I mean for face-to-face counseling.
Great. So this is a kind of interesting comment that I want to read because it kind of goes along with some of the stuff that we're talking about right now. But this person has had 8 widows contact them to help them navigate the process of what happens to my mortgage. Is a succession necessary, and who do I go to for that? How do I how do I gain access to his bank accounts? It's so much they need help with. However, it does not fit into pre-purchase or default as they are not behind on the mortgage. So just something to be, I think they're suggesting it as a form of counseling that should be allowed.
Thank you. I took it that way, and we're
Okay.
taking notes.
Okay. All right. I am going to go to Debbie Chandler. Debbie, you should be able to unmute yourself and speak. Are you there, Debbie?
Yes.
Ah, there you go. Go for it.
Okay, I was talking. I didn't know I was not yet unmuted. David, thank you. I just basically said that your presentation has been very beneficial to us. I'm the director of a HCA statewide in Arizona, and I'm going to answer your question fairly directly, but first I want to comment on the reverse mortgage conversation. We have a full-time HECM counselor, reverse mortgage, who does 40 to 50 counseling sessions a month and has been doing that for the past many years. It's a wonderful solution for seniors when it's able to be used in the right way, as you already know. But you asked about payment, and there is no HUD payment for reverse mortgage counseling. So that would be an added benefit. That's one of the things that HUD's not funding directly, other than reverse mortgage default.
Debbie,
Obviously,
respectfully, if I may, Debbie, that's not correct. We do support HECM counseling in the Comprehensive Housing Counseling Grant Program. I'll also add that many agencies have also established what I'll describe as a sliding scale fee-for-service approach, depending on income, where they do charge a fee-for-service directly to the consumer who's receiving counseling. But we do fund HECM counseling in the Comprehensive Housing Counseling Program, particularly applaud the effort to focus on low to moderate income consumers in the space.
Yes, thank you. I guess I was looking more for a fee-for-service directly for each contact or each counseling session that's done, as opposed to just the comprehensive, because of course the comprehensive money is limited and it goes for a lot of things. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. So, but listen, and we are also really urging people who have heard me speak at industry programs. I speak about fee for service at every program I go to, and the value of it for whether it's a lender or a real estate provider or a service or whoever it may be. So we're in agreement there, Debbie. Absolutely.
Great. And I will share with you, we do a fee for service. It's very modest, but it is something. And I am also a believer in fee for service. The other two items that traditionally we don't get paid for directly is home buyer services and foreclosure services. And of course, we've had the HAF fund and a lot of things have come out of the COVID piece, but going forward, those needs are consistent throughout time. And I know you're going to say that the comprehensive grant covers them, but again, the individual sessions, if there were payment for accomplished sessions, or maybe for reverse mortgage, if it's for when a loan is booked, kind of a thing, as a fee for each accomplishment with the client. So those are just my comments.
No, Debbie, thank you. And I want to respond to your second point as well. And I want to give kudos to NHRC and Lot Diaz and a host of others who have been very focused on expanding the use of a fee for service in pre-purchase housing counseling. And I would assume that everyone is aware of it, but just to be sure, something I said during our national virtual conference, I believe that every housing counseling organization should be approaching your local banks, and whether they be national, regional, local, as well as other mortgage originators right now, because for over a decade, there has been a challenge with regard to building the capacity in this space, both of lenders to participate as well as our agencies, because of a concern over the Real Estate Settlement Procedure Act, or RESPA. And the counseling community has been doing great work to try to address that issue, to take programs to scale. About a month ago, the CFPB made a big move. It affirmed earlier HUD guidance from, in fact, when HUD had authority under RESPA, that in fact fee for service, as long as it met conditions established by the Office of Housing Counseling that everyone here knows well, that in fact fee for service counseling is going to be RESPA compliant. It's a post and it affirms what is HUD guidance, essentially what's called 1999-1, the guidance in this space. This is a wonderful time to approach your banks and others to say, work with us. Here's how it meets needs as far as the Community Reinvestment Act, and here's how we can help you build your business in every community to, in fact, obviously address the homeownership gap in our nation, as well as the bank CRA requirements. It's a moment in time we need to take full advantage of. And Ellie, I'm sure you've shared this information with your members, but perhaps we could share it again after the fact.
Great. Okay, let's see. Somebody said any pressure you can put on government agencies to take action against investors using zombie second mortgages to take advantage of homeowners would be appreciated.
So our office is in frequent conversation with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. In fact, we have a regular check-in next week. And we're working very closely with other agencies. I must say, this administration is really focused on productive relationships between the agencies. I can't go into the details of our conversations, but your point is heard, and I understand what you're talking about.
So this is, there's been a couple of things about rental counseling, but this one is from somebody in Chicago. As a sanctuary city, rental counseling has become overwhelming for the most vulnerable, elderly, disabled, homeless, and eminent homeless individuals and families we serve here in Chicago. This is an extremely challenging time to be here doing this work.
Yeah, and that's part of our work in the New American space. We are really looking to broaden the commitment to services as well as the number of providers working in this space. It is a very specialized form of service where cultural sensitivity, language access, all the items we've been focused on have to come together, as well as working with other agencies who are part of other safety nets through agencies other than HUD. And that's going to be the discussions we're beginning at all of our regional meetings moving forward.
Okay, I'm just trying to scroll through here to see. more talk about the threat of insurance companies pulling out of particularly states where there's been quite a few disasters. California and Florida come to mind.
Yeah, and if I could, Ellie, I want to add as well,
Mhm.
the importance, we completely understand insurance is getting very expensive in many areas, that insurance companies are limiting access to product or not serving communities. But I also want to note, equally important is reaching consumers before they stop paying for homeowners insurance. Because again, those situations are devastating, and we've seen it in Florida, Colorado, Arizona, California. It's really become more of a widespread issue, and of course, it's individuals living on fixed income. I understand, but one of the recommendations that we have made to a number of agencies is the importance of proactive public education on that issue.
Okay, let's see. Several mortgage loans require housing counseling to receive the loan, except FHA. How can we get FHA to require housing counseling as part of eligibility requirements?
So that has been an active topic of discussion during my tenure in my role. I think that certainly we have regular meetings with FHA on a host of issues about housing counseling. I have to admit, for the first 2 years of my tenure, we were focused on foreclosure prevention, but I am a strong advocate for the point that was just made, the role of counseling in the FHA program. I will note that FHA has extensive congressional oversight. Even, for example, the MIP adjustments were reviewed by OMB and others. Again, I invite you to continue to call for that. Internally, it is something that our office is very focused on as well.
Okay, and a few people have talked about providing some sort of continuation of the assistance that happened during the pandemic for emergency rental assistance and for emergency mortgage assistance.
Yeah. So I'll share with you that that's something that HUD Secretary Fudge feels very strongly about. And we're having internal discussions at HUD, particularly on the issue of eviction prevention, because that's where we've seen. First, thank you all for your good works under our program. I mean, I know that, for example, over 300 sessions were referred to Treasury programs over the past 2 years. That's a lot of good work. Thank you. Another area not captured in most instances under our program in the past. But we are looking internally at HUD with regard to what more can HUD do on this issue. Of course, Congress sent these funds to Treasury for administration, so that's a different issue than I can address. But HUD is looking at sustainability programs in both spaces as we move forward.
Okay, this was kind of addressed in a couple of different ways, but particularly for smaller organizations, there is an issue with transition. So a smaller organization may not be able to afford to bring somebody on prior to, let's say, an executive director's retirement. So this one person is the executive director and the certified housing counselor for their HUD-approved organization. And they don't want to have to shut down, but they can't afford to hire somebody for that initial training process. Even if it's a certified housing counselor already, they need to have the training to be the executive director. So there's just this kind of a couple of different people asking about funding for transition.
So first, thank you for raising the issue. Our office has noted that, and we hope to be able to provide more training, not only to counselors, but the range of staff who work in a counseling organization, from leadership and management to, in fact, intake specialists or individuals who are social workers and so on, who have different roles at the organization. And that's also part of our modernization discussions as we move forward, recognizing that you can be much more efficient having staff who are cross-trained and also we support their efforts in outreach or follow-up, for example, in the program. So that's something we're looking at, and we really welcome your thoughts. With regard to the issue that was raised specifically here with transitions, I used to be, when I first joined the housing counseling community, we were a staff of 3 at Suffolk Housing Services in New York. So I understand the point. It's very well taken. Let me say that first, our office will make every effort to work with any agency that is having some issue with regard to transition or with regard to losing a staff person or some medical leave, whatever the issue may be. Now, that said as well, we also want to ensure that to the extent we can, for example, where there's only one housing counselor in the organization, that perhaps someone in management also becomes certified as a backstop if that staff person should happen to leave. So what I do invite you to do is to reach out to your point of contact at HUD to see how we can play a role. We want to be supportive for this period of time. Perhaps it could be through the use of a contractor for a short period of time who is working on a set number of clients. But again, we want to be open and flexible. We have to follow our statutes, so there's certain limitations to what we can do. But again, we want to be supportive. So I invite you to follow up with our office.
Okay, so this is another HECM question. HUD requires HECM counselors to use CBRIT tool via RMA IBIS. Can we integrate it through our approved CMS?
I don't see, just lightly responding to the question, an issue with that. In fact, even our office is looking at complementing or using CBRIT with more what I'll describe advanced tools that counselors and, in fact, your clients can use with you. It's a question of resources and what we can do and how we approach it. But again, as long as the tool is being used in conjunction with other educational or CMS software, I do not have a concern. I just invite you to speak with our staff to ensure that everything meets our requirements. But we recognize that there are many really, first, cost-effective, but then secondly as well, time-effective and educational tools out there that use technology that we need to be bridging into our program.
Okay. A suggestion.
Now, I am surprised, if I may, Ellie, there's one question that has not emerged here about the handbook. And perhaps it's because I said we have the workshop coming up, the seminar coming up. A lot of people have been asking me about, is HUD going to continue to require a budget? Because they're looking at language in the handbook, which was in the original handbook a decade ago, that speaks about doing appropriate financial analysis for consumers with regard to their situation. Budgets are still required in pre-purchase and post-purchase, foreclosure, eviction prevention, in almost every category of housing counseling. So if anyone is wondering about that, we are not stepping back in any way from our expectations for a budget as part of a financial review. What I have been saying, just to be very clear, is there may be situations where doing a budget isn't priority number one, such as when someone has lost their home due to a disaster, or maybe has some other finite need. And what our hope is we're looking at expanding the definition of counseling, that we'll be able to say to you, deliver the services the consumer's needs at that point in time. Be responsive to what the consumer is asking for you. Then, of course, as appropriate, we'll offer follow-up on all the other aspects of the traditional definitions of housing counseling. But when someone is calling and they need help to apply for emergency rental assistance program, and they don't feel they want to do a budget, they just need help submitting that form, we want you to be in a position to say yes, but offer additional services. And like other suggestions made today, I think in the end, we'll be developing a stronger long-term relationship with our clients by taking that approach.
Okay, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and then get into some of the Q&A, specific questions. How can we get a printed copy of the new handbook? And I think the question isn't downloading and printing themselves. I think they're looking for an already printed copy.
Yeah, so currently it is available online only because it is while very close to final, there are final edits being made, such as the educational materials for HECM counseling are being updated. That's one of the links that's going to be changing. We'll provide there are more information that speaks to the changes that are available on HUD Exchange and elsewhere. But right now, HUD Exchange is the only source for the information. When we are in final form, it will be available much more widely.
Okay. This is kind of a question, and I think somebody else brought it up as kind of a suggestion under your tell me what you think should be added for housing counseling, but protecting buyers who don't have government-backed mortgages. And then they end up coming to housing counseling, right? And they don't have the same protections. So just if there's, I don't know if there's any thinking at HUD about how to address that.
I will say that we have been in conversation, particularly during the pandemic, with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau on that issue. Let me simply say that our office and HUD believes in very strong consumer protections and the importance of housing counseling for every consumer, regardless of mortgage type. But beyond that, I would have to defer to essentially the CFPB or FHA or others who may be looking at the issue in a different way.
Okay. And then one person who asked this question was specifically referring to the rent-to-own program that you were talking about during your presentation.
Well, the rent-to-own program is really a public outreach initiative where, in essence, we're going to suggest to consumers to speak with a counseling organization about exploring homeownership and mortgage approval. The rent-to-own program doesn't necessarily recommend any particular mortgage type. We leave it to the counseling agency to suggest 3 or more types. Though I do believe that many consumers who are in Section 8 housing or housed through housing finance agency or a local authority, I think there are certain mortgage programs that's more likely they're going to take advantage of, and there are some great programs out there. I think that this is a win-win program for counselors as well as tenants who may be mortgage ready and not aware of it.
Okay. Does OHC plan to have future webinars, trainings focusing on foreclosure prevention counseling? There was very little mention of foreclosure prevention counseling in the recent 2023 community conference. Our agency is in Jacksonville, Florida, and we are seeing an increase in homeowners in default or at risk of default.
The answer is yes, and as in fact FHA or other programs update their loss mitigation programs, we will be conducting webinars. We try to break those very quickly when changes are announced to keep everyone updated through what I'll label continuing education in the counseling community. You also will see it in our email as well as on Housing Counseling Today. We, in the regional meetings, will have an update from FHA on program changes within FHA loss mit. So that will be at each of the programs as well. So the answer is yes. Most of the programs currently in place are rather status quo. So some of the programs that are currently on demand that we did recently over the past year still apply.
Okay, so this is really, there are 2 questions related to the regional meetings, and I'll just ask them in concert.
Sure.
First of all, is there a virtual option? And second of all, where are the homeownership opportunities on the West Coast, or are there any?
Well, I mentioned the calls from the Bay Area, and I understand the challenges of the high cost of housing, where people have to live an hour and a half away from where they work. I mean, I acknowledge the point being made on that comment. I will say I applaud some of the efforts of this California Housing Finance Agency to work with counseling agencies in state to do more on that front. They were among the more progressive, using what I'll call a fixed fee, right, for program services and some of the lending programs that they do offer. But it is a very challenging situation. I acknowledge that. The original thought behind the regional meetings was that they would be in person, and that has been the focus. We just had a conversation this morning because of the demand for the upcoming Atlanta meeting. We don't know if we have the resources or the technology yet to do this, But if in fact the demand is much more than space permits, which is about 150 people at the site we are in Atlanta, a municipal building, we are exploring for folks who would like to attend to have a virtual opportunity. It will be a regional opportunity within the footprint of the regional meeting, but we also will look at larger sites moving forward to other areas. I will note, though, there's a certain, I'll describe it as intimacy of question and answer in the size that we were trying to do, because we're doing breakout groups. Part of the program is jointly with FDIC, having regional banks in the room, trying to do introductions and have you meet with regional banks so that your agencies can explore your own working relationship with those institutions. So that becomes much more challenging with larger events. But we're trying to address this. This is a good challenge, and I will add for Atlanta, we are exploring virtual because of the requests.
If a homeowner wants to explore options with refinance, etc., but they are not delinquent on their mortgage, could they fall under the financial management and budget counseling? It wouldn't be post-purchase delinquency.
Actually, that would fall. You have a choice. You could call it pre-purchase. You could call it exactly that. There are several ways of reporting it, but it can be captured as you feel appropriate.
Okay. Let's see. How connected should we be to our local HUD office?
Oh, come on. What do you want me to say there? Of course, you should be very connected. Field Policy and Management is really eagerly working with us across the country. I think you have great opportunities where the individuals in those offices can also connect you and help you network with other stakeholders who they work with. For example, for those who've worked on the house party events, a lot of networking behind the scenes has been occurring. Also, with regard to our regional meetings, the field offices are playing and regional offices are playing an extremely active role. And I'll also add that they can be a conduit to additional federal support that perhaps you haven't really quite figured out how to approach or knock on the door of localities yet, or whatever the issue may be. So I know from my engagement with the field office and regional office teams, they are raring to go to engage with you. And I urge everyone to try to engage with our counterparts locally.
Okay, is there a plan to bridge HMIS products and CMS products? We have housing counselors who work with homeless clients and are required to use an HMIS product. Now they have to do double entry and pay for 2 systems.
Yeah, welcome to the world of antiquated and out-of-date technology systems in the federal government. I'll share with everyone that updating our own systems is a priority for our office. And I'll add, for those of you who know my colleague Danbury Carmen, it has been his priority over a decade to get improved systems for our office, and he continues to work on that. We are hopeful that in the coming year, depending on budget and discussions right now on the Hill, that we will be updating all of our systems to be much more engaging with other HUD offices, including FHA, and we hope other programs, as well as modernizing the system to get tremendous data from all of our clients real time with you. And of course, that would have to translate into all the client management systems. This would all be a healthy progression over a period of time. But unfortunately, HUD systems in each office are disparate, distinct. Most of the offices have not had resources to update for many years. And so I apologize for the challenges you're dealing with. Even in our own programs, there's a reason that in our new homeownership initiative, we are requesting data through a quarterly report function. It's because our systems cannot be updated right now until we are modernized. So I understand the point, and everyone at HUD hopes that we'll have resources to update and bring things together as we move forward.
And back to the house, like that kind of house party regional meetings, what do we need to do to coordinate with to join the HUD house party?
So just reach out to your regional office. Now, and most of them have just completed an event. And so I would suggest that you reach out and say, if you are planning another home ownership event or house party, we would like to be part of it. And I am sure they'll be happy to engage with you. And most will be in time. They may not know it yet, but most will be in time.
Okay. All right. Regarding mortgage underwriting and the use of current property taxes versus proposed property taxes, where can one attempt to suggest changes for uniformity in underwriting in that regard? Would that be CFPB or a HUD thing?
Well, if it's related to FHA, you certainly can write a letter to Commissioner Gordon. You could write it to me. I'd be happy to share it. With regard to other more broad issues, of course, you can write to the CFPB or FHFA if it's a Fannie or Freddie situation. But I would simply go right to the top if you're writing a letter, and you want to communicate a position.
Okay, I think that pretty much covers the questions. And there may have been some questions that popped into the chat that I missed, so I apologize to people if I missed your questions. If I did miss something, you can email me directly, and I will try to get that over to David, and David will respond to me, and I'll respond to you like that. So, David, are there any final words that you'd like to say before we move on?
Well, first, I just want to thank everyone. It truly is a joy for me and our entire team at the Office of Housing Counseling to work with you. I really look forward to sharing some wonderful announcements with you in the coming months. We look forward to continuing to support your programs. If any of you are planning conferences or events, homeownership events, or you're doing work in the sustainability space, and you'd like to invite a member of our team to attend, please do so. And most importantly, continue to communicate with us, share your successes, share your challenges. We're really listening. And back to the regional meetings and our conference, my being here today, we really want to engage with you, and every opportunity we have becomes a listening session so we can improve the program. But more importantly, back to where I began, elevate the profession and establish broad-based new relationships between you, other programs, and the private sector. So again, in a few years, we're serving not 1,200,000 consumers a year, but over 3 million households a year. And again, as a number of you suggested, people think to approach a housing counselor well before they begin shopping for their home, or to speak to you about a challenge they may be facing, so they really can plan for how they can sustain and go through their journey of homeownership. And again, thank you, everyone. And I want to thank my team from the Office of Housing Counseling who spent a few minutes listening in too. We look forward to engaging with you through the year.
And with that, I will hand it over to Bruce to